What's up guys, I'm Shane and this is Spare Change. If it's your first time here on the channel, we discuss all things audio and video, new movies, new AV equipment. So if you're not subscribed, then tap the subscribe button for new weekly videos. Today for review, we'll be taking a look at Season 1 of The Mandalorian on Disney Plus 4K streaming. I'm not going to talk about the show itself, I'm just going to share with you my thoughts on the video and the audio quality. Now for a few tech specs. The show was shot in 4.5K. It's got a 4K DI. Runtime is about a half an hour an episode, maybe a little more. Aspect ratio is 239:1, so you will have those big black bars. Now speaking about those black bars, I'm glad they kept it in the wider CinemaScope aspect ratio. This way it stays in line with the Star Wars movies and gives it a more cinematic feel rather than going with a 16:9 ratio and being more like, well, a TV show. That being said, visually, I felt that at certain times the show kind of flip-flopped between looking like a television show and looking like a feature film. There were some scenes that felt very much like they were on a soundstage or in front of a green screen. I'd hate to say it had a CW feel about it sometimes, but that's kind of what I thought, especially with some of the CGI that didn't look so polished. Did you see the darksaber? But I get it though, it's a television show. Anyways, as far as resolution and clarity, I thought all the episodes were fairly 4K sharp and a lot of the times quite crisp. I think the added crispiness can bring out the green screen effect more and give certain shots that flat background appearance. But things like the desert sand in episode 4 were highly detailed, enough so that you could see the actual grains of sand, the battle marks on Mando's armor and the texture of his cape, and not to mention all the aging and dirt on the stormtroopers were super detailed. I also liked how crisp all the backgrounds were. Whether it was out in the desert or in the forest or in some cantina, there was always great attention to all those set pieces. As for HDR, as some of you might already know, it's not the brightest nor most impressive implementation. The first thing I thought when I first saw the first episode was how dull everything looked. Blacks were more gray and the color palette was very muted. I'd say visually it reminded me of both The Last Jedi and Rogue One. Not much color and some elevated black levels. However, there are some nice shots, like anything that's in the desert, and more recently in the last episode. Episode 8, there was a great scene with the sun illuminating the shot in the background with some decent brightness, gradational tones, and even a lens flare. But really though, colors aren't a strong point in the show. As for spectral highlights, as mentioned, the sun can have some nice peak brightness. The lava in episode 8 actually had a pretty strong red and orange glow, and there were a handful of bright explosions and blaster fire. Oh, and don't forget the incinerator trooper when he starts burning everything down. This is probably as bright and colorful as this show gets. Now, like I mentioned before, the black levels aren't the best. And this is something that I normally wouldn't do, but if you go and turn on your display's contrast enhancer, you could get some really good pop out of the image. Some of the blacks are so gray you won't be crushing anything, and there's not too much to clip, so your mileage may vary. If you're watching on an OLED, then you might only need some minor tweaking. Audio is in Dolby Atmos, and just like the more recent Star Wars movies, I thought the Atmos height effects were used sparingly. I heard some effects in episode 7 when the flying creatures attack from above, and there was some okay ambiance in the overheads and the lower surrounds in the tunnel in episode 8. Now, I was kinda surprised there wasn't anything going on when the Mandalorians come flying in from above in episode 3. I mean, they all had jetpacks and were zipping around, but there was nothing happening in the high channels. To be fair though, there was some good lower channel usage from blaster fire and explosions going off. And speaking of explosions, bass response wasn't all that great either. It's there and it adds to the scene, but it's nothing that's gonna impress. If there's one real positive about the show's mix, is that the music does fill in the soundstage quite nicely. There's some overhead extension and I thought it was really spacious. One of the best sounding scenes was the Mudhorn fight in episode 2. There's some good separation and some good panning effects amongst the channels. And dialogue for the entire show was always clean and easy to hear without any issues. So for audio, I'm gonna have to go with a 7.1. It's a little better than average because of the musical score. Otherwise, it could use more height channel usage to match what's happening on screen more accurately, and bass could use a boost as well. And is it just me or does anyone else feel like they're watching Rocky when the music starts playing? For overall video, I'm gonna go with a 7.9. This is a digital stream, so you can expect some compression issues like color banding. The HDR isn't all that great, and the colors are bland due to some low contrast. But it is a very sharp, very detailed show. If you want to get some added pop to the image, I'd say bump that contrast level. You might like what you get. As a television show, I think it's pretty good, and I think it is worth the $7 a month. So those are my thoughts on The Mandalorian on Disney Plus 4K. Have you seen it yet, and what are your thoughts on it? Leave us a comment down below. As always, thanks for watching, follow us on social media, and if you want to support the channel and get exclusive updates or just have some questions, then stop by our Patreon page. Like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you guys again in the next one.